building a router circle cutting jig at randallprice.com. Today I'm going to build a circle jig for my router. I have a Bosch plunge router, and I'm just going to try to build this jig out of parts that I have here on hand in the shop. I have a piece of 1/2 inch plywood, a piece of 1/4 by 3/4 inch oak, a few miscellaneous pieces of hardware that I went through my hardware supply there and found. So this should be all I need to build the jig, and I'll show you in just a minute what the basic design is going to be. Okay, here's a photo of a circle jig, and this is looking at one from the bottom, and basically it has a plate that the router mounts on, a sliding bar that slides in a groove. That groove has a pin in it for the circle jig to pivot on, and then on the top side this one has a machine screw that actually goes through a T-nut to tighten this sliding piece down so you can vary the diameter of the circle that you want to cut. Another design that I found, and it's a little bit more complicated, this is from American Woodworking Magazine. This is a free download that they have. It's about the same design, it's a little bit more complicated. So what I've decided to do is use this basic shape for the jig, cut a groove in the base for this sliding piece to slide in. This particular piece, if you look at the profile, it's kind of a stepped design. I'm going to do just a rectangular piece, and I will, as they did here, put a machine screw through that rectangular piece, a groove in the top of this plywood base with they use a knob, but I'll just use a wing nut on top to tighten it down. But I'll go ahead and start by rough sizing my base down to size, and as I go along I'll show you what I'm doing, because I'm kind of doing a variation on both of these. First thing I'll do is rough cut my plywood base to length. I'm ripping this piece to the same width as the base of my router, and I'm ripping this over here on the bandsaw rather than on the table saw, because trying to rip such a short piece would be dangerous over on the table saw. Here's the basic layout for my base. I'll cut a circular hole right here with the hole saw, and the center of my router will be centered on this hole. I'll cut a slot all the way through right here. That's for my adjustment for the diameter of my circle. There will be a bolt that goes clear through there with a wing nut on the top. And then on the back side, from this hole clear to the end, I'll cut a dado all the way for my 1/4 by 3/4 inch piece of oak to slide in to adjust the width. So I'll go over to the drill press, drill this hole. I will cut this on the router table, flip it over, and then I'll cut my dado as well on the router table. Okay, I'm going to route out the slot over on the router table using a spiral cutter bit. But before I do that, I want to drill a 1/4 inch hole at each end so I'll know what the extents of the slot is that I need to route, so I can see that over on the router table. So I have the 1/4 inch spiral cutter bit in my router table. This will be a pretty easy setup. I'll just set one of the holes on the bit, and I can set my fence by that. It'll also mark the starting position with that. And I'll come down here and set the bit on the ending hole, another piece of tape there, so I'll know where to end. I should be able to see that, but just in case, I want to have that marked. So what I'll do is go halfway, or route half the way through, adjust my router up, and then route the rest of the way through. I switched out my 1/4 inch spiral bit with a 1/2 inch straight cutting bit. So what I plan to do is cut a dado right down the center. I left the fence exactly where it was since it's in the center line of this piece. So I'll route 1/2 inch groove right down the center, and then I'll sneak up on the width just by slightly offsetting the fence and then running it through one way and then through the other way. Okay, referring back to the American Woodworker plan, I'm going to make this shorter adjustment piece, which is 8 inches long, and next I'm going to drill the holes for the screw that tightens this pivot arm to the base. So I'll drill 3 holes and countersink them for that screw to go into. Okay, I have my 3 holes drilled. I need to countersink these holes, and I already started working on this hole a little bit. And to countersink them, you could use a larger drill bit. I have this little hand countersink tool, and it works like this. I've got all those 3 of those holes countersunk. The machine screw fits right in there with the head slightly below the surface of the pivot arm. Now this pivot arm slides back and forth in the slot pretty good, and then you can just tighten that down, and I can't move that, so that'll work well. Now all I got to do is make two holes in this for pivot points, and on the American Woodworking plan it calls for a number 8 machine screw and having the hole tapped for the machine screw threads in that pivot arm. Well, I don't have a number 8 tap, I have a number 10 tap, so if I can find another, a number 10 screw, I will try tapping out a piece of oak and see how that works. And surprisingly enough, I took my extra piece of oak that I made the pivot arm from and screwed this screw in here, and it is very tight. My only problem is that I do not have a flathead number 10 screw, and my piece is pretty thin here. So what I'll do is, what I'm thinking about doing is just grinding the head of this screw down pretty thin and then countersinking it and see if that won't work. Took my test piece over to the drill press and countersunk the hole with a Forstner bit. I ground the head of this machine screw down, so we'll see how it fits. obviously, to use this screw, I don't want it to be this long. I'll take a hacksaw and cut it off to a more reasonable length. That looks good. It's below the surface of the wood. I still got enough thread or enough slot in the screw head to tighten that up with a Phillips head, but that seems pretty snug, pretty sturdy, and I think that will work. So I'll go drill and tap my actual pivot arm on my circle jig. So there, I went over and took a screwdriver and laid this flat on the bench so I could get it started straight. So there's that. Now, how you mount your router to this base is going to vary with the type of router that you have. But on this one that I have, I think I'll be able to leave my base plate on. It has 2 holes here and then one on the other side that is designed for mounting this router to a router table. So my plan is just to drill 3 1/4 inch holes and countersink some 1/4 inch flathead machine screws through the base, and then put some nuts on the top to hold it on. On your router, you may not have these auxiliary holes. You may have to remove the base and then actually use the threaded holes that your base plate attaches to your router on to mount the base plate to, but you just have to vary that based on your router. I've fastened my router to the base. I drilled 3 holes and countersunk them and put the machine screws through those, so that's securely mounted. Considering I was kind of loosely following 2 different plans and kind of designing this as I went, it didn't turn out too bad, so I'll get a piece of wood and try this out. Okay, I've drilled a hole in a piece of scrap plywood, and I've got the circle jig. I'm sitting in that. I've got a 1/4 inch spiral bit in the router, so we'll see how it does. That's the circle jig. The last thing that I want to do to the circle cutting jig is to cut the base to roughly the same shape as was seen in the popular woodworking circle cutting jig. So I've measured 1 inch to either side of the center line on the back of the circle cutting jig. Just made a line to intersect with the side of the router base on both sides. And then I just trace the side of the router base on the other end. I'll remove the router and I'll cut along those lines on the bandsaw and sand down to the line. Here's the circle jig, trimmed to size, and I'll mount the router on it and I will be done. So there is the finished circle cutting router jig. For woodworking plans, tips, and techniques, visit randallprice.com.